Some weapons were built to kill, others were built to conquer, but a rare few were built to change everything. They didn't just alter battles, they ended eras, they toppled kings, they reshaped the world itself. And while most were forgotten, these few left their mark on all of us, in how we live, how we fight, and how we define power. Today we're counting down the 10 most world-altering weapons in human history, from fire-forged blades to steel-forged bullets, from primitive tools of death to devices so powerful they threaten to end humanity altogether. This is the 10th weapons that rewrote history. At number 10, we have the hand axe, the first true weapon in human history. It wasn't forged in fire, it wasn't engineered with science, it was a sharpened stone, crudely chipped and shaped, but it changed everything. Used over 1 million years ago, this was the weapon that gave early humans the edge over every predator they faced. It allowed them to hunt, defend, and dominate. But more than that, it taught them to create, to shape nature into something deadly, to hold power in the palm of their hand. The hand axe was simple, but in the hands of early man, it marked the birth of strategy, of intentional violence. No longer did humans rely on tooth and claw. They had tech. This one weapon set humanity on a path that no other species ever walked. Not just survival, but conquest. The first weapon didn't look like much, but it was the spark that would ignite all others. At number 9, we have the weapon that transformed warriors into armies and war into empire, the bronze sword. Around 1600 BCE, something incredible happened. We stopped breaking rocks and started forging metal. With bronze, we crafted blades that didn't chip or shatter. They could be sharpened, mass-produced, and most importantly, wielded by soldiers trained to use them. The bronze sword wasn't just a new tool for killing, it was a symbol of state power. The kings who controlled the metal controlled the armies, and the armies who carried these blades controlled everything else. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Hittites to the Mycenaeans. This was the weapon of civilization's first military elite. For the first time, soldiers became a class of their own. War became organized, battles became coordinated, and leadership meant more than birthright, it meant command over men with blades. The bronze sword carved more than bodies. It carved borders, alliances, dynasties, and history itself. At number 8, we have the weapon that replaced the sword and reigned for over 1,000 years, the iron-tipped spear. Once we discovered how to smelt iron, bronze became obsolete. It was harder, cheaper, and perfect for crafting something longer, stronger, and far more dangerous from a distance. Enter the spear. Simple? Yes. But in the hands of a trained formation, unstoppable. From Greek hoplites to Roman legionnaires, from Persian immortals to medieval pikemen, the spear was the ultimate force multiplier. While a sword fought one-on-one, a spear formation fought as one. Shields overlapped, spears thrust in unison. Enemies didn't face a soldier, they faced a wall. And unlike swords, spears were fast to make and easy to learn. You didn't need nobility, you didn't need years of training, just discipline and a sharp piece of metal on a stick. The iron spear was the weapon of the people. It allowed empires to rise, borders to expand, and military power to become scalable. It wasn't flashy, but for centuries, nothing came close to its brutal efficiency. And at number 7, we have the weapon that made empires fall before they ever reached the battlefield, the composite bow. Smaller than a longbow, but packing far more power, the composite bow was made from wood, sinew, and horn fused together for elasticity and strength. It was compact, efficient, and absolutely lethal when fired from horseback. This was the weapon of the Mongol horde, the lightning-fast cavalry that swept across Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe in the 13th century. Genghis Khan didn't build the largest contiguous land empire in human history with brute force. He did it with speed, discipline, and this weapon. Each Mongol horseman carried multiple composite bows and dozens of arrows. They could fire with terrifying accuracy at full gallop, launching shots behind their backs mid-charge, a tactic that bewildered and broke armies twice their size. They didn't fight fair, they fought smart. The composite bow allowed for hit-and-run warfare, psychological manipulation, and overwhelming tactical advantage. It turned battlefields into chessboards and the Mongols into grandmasters. Cities surrendered without a fight. Kingdoms collapsed in fear. And it all came from a weapon no longer than your arm, but powerful enough to crack history in half. It wasn't the biggest bow, it was just the last one you ever saw coming. At number 6, we have the weapon that shattered centuries of tradition and took down the elite class that ruled with blade and horse, the English longbow. Picture this: October 25th, 1415, a muddy field in northern France. Thousands of armored French knights, proud, mounted and gleaming in steel, charging straight at a smaller, exhausted English force. Within minutes, the battlefield is a slaughterhouse. This was the Battle of Agincourt, and the longbow won it. Made of yew wood, stretching over 6 feet, the English longbow had a draw weight of over 100 pounds. A skilled archer could fire 12 arrows per minute, and each one could punch straight through plate armor. But here's the real twist. It wasn't wielded by nobles, it was wielded by peasants. This weapon didn't just kill knights, it killed the idea of knighthood. No matter how noble your blood, how polished your armor, or how fine your horse, a single arrow could drop you like a sack of meat. The longbow democratized war. It turned commoners into lethal assets, and it forced medieval powers to rethink everything they knew about combat, training, and class structure. It wasn't just a bow, it was a revolution, strung tight and ready to snap. At number 5, we have the weapon that ended the age of castles and turned war into an industrial process: the musket. Crude, slow, loud, but game-changing. The musket first appeared in Europe during the 16th century. It was heavy, inaccurate, took forever to reload, and yet it rewrote 1,000 years of military doctrine. Why? Because it could be mass-produced, and any farmer could be trained to use one in a matter of weeks. Gone were the days of elite warriors trained from birth. Now anyone could hold the power to kill, cheaply, efficiently, and in volume. Armies no longer needed skill, they needed numbers. Soldiers formed into firing lines, trained to load and shoot in volleys, unleashing synchronized walls of lead. It wasn't about precision, it was about pressure. And castles? Useless. Stone didn't stand a chance against gunpowder artillery. The musket gave birth to the modern standing army. State-funded, standardized, and terrifying in size. From the Napoleonic Wars to the American Revolution, this was the weapon that tore through monarchies and redrew global borders. It turned war from a noble pursuit into a machine. And once the musket took the battlefield, the sword was done. And at number 4, we have a weapon so simple it often gets overlooked. But it turned every soldier into a backup swordsman, and every charge into a last chance for survival. The bayonet. A steel blade affixed to the end of a musket, the bayonet was born in the 17th century as a desperate solution to a deadly problem. Once you fired your musket, you were defenseless. Reloading took up to 20 seconds, more than enough time to be overrun. So instead of becoming a sitting duck, you turned your gun into a spear. And suddenly, infantry had teeth. The bayonet changed the entire rhythm of warfare. It wasn't just about firing anymore. It was about closing in. Massive armies would open fire, reload, advance, and then charge with bayonets drawn. A line of muskets became a wall of stabbing steel. It made battles personal again, loud, chaotic, and face-to-face. In the Napoleonic Wars, American Civil War, and countless colonial conflicts, the bayonet was the last argument made after the smoke cleared. It was fear made physical, a symbol that even after you ran out of bullets, you were never out of fight. And at number 3, we have the most widespread firearm in human history. A gun so reliable, so simple, and so deadly that it armed both governments and guerrillas alike. The AK-47. It was born in the ruins of World War II. The Soviet Union needed a new infantry weapon, something anyone could use. Fast to make, easy to fix, deadly and dirt cheap. So in 1947, a tank mechanic named Mikhail Kalashnikov designed a rifle that could do just that. The Avtomat Kalashnikova Model 1947, better known as the AK-47, wasn't the most accurate rifle in the world. But that didn't matter. It worked in sand, in rain, in freezing mud. You could bury it, drag it, dunk it, and it would still fire. It was so easy to produce that the Soviets flooded their allies and proxy states with them during the Cold War. And it didn't stop there. Soon, the AK-47 became the weapon of choice for freedom fighters, dictators, child soldiers, insurgents, revolutionaries, and superpowers alike. It's been wielded in every major conflict since the 1950s, from Vietnam to Afghanistan, Angola to Iraq. It's on flags, murals, currency, and magazines, a symbol of both liberation and terror. More than 100 million AKs exist in the world today, and for many people, it's the first and last weapon they'll ever see. The AK didn't just change how wars were fought, it changed who could fight them. It didn't care about borders, uniforms, or rules of engagement. It just fired. And for better or worse, it armed the planet. At number 2, we have the weapon that brought medieval warfare to its knees, a beast of armor and steel that redefined every battlefield it touched, the tank. Before the tank, battles were measured in trenches, stalemates, mud, barbed wire. World War I was a nightmare of attrition, and no one knew how to break the deadlock. Then came an idea. What if you could build a moving fortress, one that ignored bullets, rolled over barbed wire, crushed trenches, a mechanical cavalry charge? In 1916, the British unleashed the first tanks on the battlefield at the Battle of the Somme. They were slow, loud, crude, but they worked. They terrified German troops who'd never seen such machines before. And while early tanks were unreliable, the concept exploded. By World War II, tanks were no longer just weapons. They were strategic doctrine. The Germans perfected blitzkrieg, fast-moving armored columns supported by air power and infantry. It allowed them to storm across Europe in weeks. The Soviets deployed T-34s in massive numbers. The Allies countered with Shermans and later Pershings. The tank made mobility deadly. It allowed for combined arms warfare, where air, armor, and infantry moved as one brutal fist. Tanks transformed open ground into kill zones, turned cities into death traps, and forced the evolution of modern anti-armor weapons like RPGs and guided missiles. Even today, in conflicts from Syria to Ukraine, the tank remains a symbol of dominance. It's not just firepower, it's fear on tracks. Because when you hear a tank coming, you don't run toward it. And finally, at number 1, we have the weapon that didn't just end a war, it changed war itself. The weapon that made victory irrelevant and the stakes existential, the atomic bomb. August 6th, 1945. The sky above Hiroshima splits open, a blinding flash, a mushroom cloud, and in seconds, 80,000 lives vanish. 3 days later, Nagasaki, another blast. Another city reduced to ash. The atomic bomb wasn't a weapon of battle. It was a weapon of ultimatum. Built in secret by the Manhattan Project, it was the most advanced scientific collaboration in history, and the most horrifying. When Japan surrendered, it marked the end of World War II. But it also marked the beginning of something worse, the Cold War, a conflict not fought with bullets, but with arsenals. The US and the Soviet Union raced to build bigger bombs, faster missiles, deadlier payloads. One war had ended, but the threat of annihilation had only begun. We no longer feared invasion, we feared extinction. School children were taught to duck and cover. Entire cities built nuclear fallout shelters. World leaders spoke in speeches, but their hands hovered over buttons. The bomb rewrote diplomacy. It rewrote science. It rewrote what it meant to be human. Because suddenly, war wasn't about who had more troops. It was about who had the last weapon. The atomic bomb didn't just reshape history, it split it in two. Before and after. 10 weapons, from sharpened stones to city-destroying fireballs. Each one a turning point in our shared human story. They built civilizations, they ended empires, and they reminded us that the greatest power we hold is the power to destroy, but also to learn, to fear, and maybe one day to choose something better. Let us know in the comments, which weapon do you think had the biggest impact on human history? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more cinematic dives into the weapons, wars, and warriors that made our world.